It takes a while. Ah, there we go. Hi, Zoe.
Hey,
How
hey,
are
hey,
you?
how are you?
Doing well, doing well. Long time no see. I know we just chatted like 2 minutes ago.
Ages ago. It's
And
been a lot.
so, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm still in the UK. So when we,
Yes, yes, I know. It's hard right now traveling. I was just on the phone with Virgin Atlantic like 2 seconds ago, like trying to do some stuff. So,
it's
but I've given a very brief intro already. Mentioned that you're the creator of the Exodus Collective, and I don't know if you want to kind of, before you introduce yourself, but just give people some insight into what you're doing in your platform before we jump into the convo.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the Exodus Collective is all about encouraging Black folks to move to the Caribbean or move back to the Caribbean. We've done quite a few interviews with folks who are originally of Caribbean descent,
Hmm.
just encouraging them to think about going back to the islands because I think one, the Caribbean is typically seen as a place for like millionaires or people who are retired, but
Yeah.
actually, people our age can move back.
Hmm.
Um, and also, I think I was really inspired by all the amazing content that's out there with folks moving to West Africa.
Yes.
Um, for a long time, I've been tempted to move to Ghana too, but I thought, you know what, the Caribbean, it has such a brain drain with folks moving to Europe or to the
Yes.
US. Why not do something to encourage talented people to move back and to
Yes.
contribute to the development there? So it's not just about sitting on the beach and having a margarita, although I'm looking forward to doing that. Um, it's also about thinking, okay, how can we move back and contribute? So that's my thing.
No, absolutely. And something that I think we can touch on during the chat, because my family's from Jamaica, so this is near and dear to me as well. Some people can get a second citizenship based on, even if they're first generation Americans, through their parents, their grandparents, you may be able to actually get, you know what I mean, a second citizenship in the Caribbean. So it's something to just be mindful of as we're having this discussion. It can never hurt. You don't have to always, depending on the country, give up, you know what I mean, your citizenship in one country to get citizenship in another. You can have dual citizenship. So just something to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what is your
Yeah.
connection to the Caribbean?
So both my parents are from Grenada.
Awesome.
So they're probably related because
Yeah.
Grenada is so small. There's only 100,000 people, no, 112,000 on the entire island. But yeah, but before I go on, I would highly encourage people to apply for passports. If you have any
Yes.
option to do it, go for it. Because
Yes.
once you have it, then there's the option to pass it on to your children, your grandchildren. But
Hmm.
if you don't, it's such a missed opportunity. And I think if the COVID situation has taught us anything, it's like having options in terms of where you are,
Having
where you
options.
do, right? It's so
Yes.
important.
Yeah, because
And I,
even in cases where, like you say, having a second passport, some of the restrictions at the border is based on nationality, not where you live. So if you have a passport from Jamaica and they're banning Americans, you may still be able to go somewhere. So it's just something to
exactly.
consider. And
Yeah.
I'm glad you raised that point because, yeah, through COVID is what accelerated my need to want to get my second passport. So I'm
Yeah.
here for
And I
it.
think Jamaica is that you can actually apply through your grandparent.
Yes, you
So
can. You can apply through
yeah.
your grandparents as well. And it doesn't have to be both. It can be just one of them. So if you
Uh-huh.
have a grandparent who is Jamaican, you can apply. If you have a parent who is Jamaican, you can apply. And to your
Yeah.
point, once you get it, then your kids, you get what I mean, still qualify.
Right?
So something to keep
Yeah.
in mind.
I
Yeah.
think the only country that makes you give up your first citizenship is Haiti. Pretty
Okay.
much all of, I think, of from memory, pretty much all of them allow you to keep dual nationality, and the vast
Okay.
majority only allow you to apply through your parent, which is a bit
Okay.
annoying. But
Yeah.
if you're Jamaican, go for it.
No, but this is all good information for people to know. And just to let anyone know, if you want to find out this information, you can literally go to the immigration websites and you will see this information on like their proper site. So always check everything because the rules for, borders and everything like that and citizenship, all of that stuff does change sometimes. So it's important to like look at the latest before you start putting money into something.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. And also sometimes that information can be quite hard to find. So that was part of the
yeah.
motivation for starting the Exodus Collective, is that like the Caribbean is amazing, but
Hmm.
communication and storytelling in the written form online is something that we're not great at. So what you can
Yes.
also jump over to the Exodus Collective website, and we have a
Yes.
breakdown of each island, and for pretty much every island, it will tell you what the ins and outs are for applying for citizenship, for applying for a passport.
Yes.
Um, Visas, etc. So that's also a kind of a quicker way than trying to
The
navigate.
typical. Yes. And one of the reasons I really love your platform and was drawn to it initially was that you're interviewing younger. And when I say younger, most people think about retirement and retiring at an older age. And it's like, no, you can go now. You don't have to wait. And while it is suitable as well, if you're older, it's also important that this conversation is had amongst our generation too, because it opens up some options for us. And you also do interviews similar to interviews like this with people on the ground with various backgrounds and careers. So it's just a lot of information. So I just encourage you all to check it out, because it's a great, concise like amount of information with various insights. So I really appreciate that. Okay, now let's talk about your journey. Now that we talked about the platform, because I'm assuming you created because you saw the need based on your personal experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I've been traveling for quite a while. I think I first moved overseas when I was 20.
Okay.
So to be an au pair for a Russian family in Verona, Italy. I studied Italian at university. And
Okay.
so yeah, that was my first experience of living abroad. And I've always, like, my earliest memory probably is traveling to Switzerland with my dad and going camping. And that
Okay.
experience of being somewhere different and like the environment, I think it just stuck with me. So I
Mm-hmm.
always knew absolutely no way I was spending my entire life in the UK. So for me, the idea of like moving abroad, it's not that much of a big deal. I've done it before,
Mm-hmm.
but I know
Mm-hmm.
for many people, it is daunting and it is sort of like,
Yes.
where do I begin? And because I was going back and forth between the UK and Grenada for quite a while, many people would say, like, how do you do it? Like, why are you always there?
Mm-hmm.
You're not retired. Why are you thinking of spending time in Grenada? Um,
Yeah.
I thought I'd just share information, but also was really curious. Like, I knew I couldn't be the only one. I knew that
Mm-hmm.
there were other people who were moving back and who weren't like in their 70s. So I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to share the narrative a bit more and show people that it can be done because,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, the situation in the US is terrible, but it's
Mm-hmm.
far from here in the UK either. And I think after multiple generations of putting up with nonsense, like we have
Yes.
options. We don't have to
We
stay in a
have
flat.
options. Yes, that's the most important message. Like, for one, don't count yourself out of this. And two, you have options. And I also
Mhm.
think because you have children, some people say, oh, I have kids, I can't do it. It's like even more of a reason why you should go somewhere that's better for your health, and your sanity and the mental health of your children as well. I think it's important for us to consider lifestyles outside of our home countries sometimes, especially if it's going back, home, like, really returning home. So, yeah, it's
Yeah, it's
been,
way more
yeah.
complicated with kids.
Mhm.
It's way, way, way more complicated with kids, but it can
Mhm.
still be. I have
Yes.
3 kids. I don't just
Mhm.
have one. And I'm a
Mhm.
single parent as well. So if
Mhm.
anyone should be like, I can't, it should be me. But yeah, I'm highly motivated to not be here. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. And do you feel like with the children, what were some key things you had to consider? Because so I get a lot of people who they are like, oh, but I have kids. And I'm like, well, because I don't have kids, it's hard for me to give the perspective. But like, what would you say would be some of the biggest things for consideration, such as like maybe perhaps schooling and things like that you need to think about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely schooling. Definitely
Hmm.
schooling. But I think it's tricky. I think the main thing is like you as a parent. So I think if you're all about like making sure that your kid is in like the top school and like playing lacrosse and water polo and like going on excursions to like Switzerland for ski trips, like the Caribbean probably isn't going to work for you because the stuff that you feel is important isn't
Yeah.
going to be on offer. But if you
Hmm.
are kind of more open to being, okay, like this is about enriching my kids' sense of identity, about being grounded, about them getting sort of a global experience that will
Yes.
equip them for the future, then I think it's going to be easier for you to see how the Caribbean can potentially work for you. And then on top of that, there are fabulous, I don't know what you call it in American, but public schools,
Yeah.
fabulous free schools that kids can
Yes.
go to. And they're also really affordable, fantastic private schools. Um,
Yes.
I don't think that moving to the Caribbean necessarily means that you'll have a poorer standard of education. And even
Hmm.
more so, like the class sizes are small. You're talking about
Yes.
16 children in a class compared to
Hmm.
25 or 30 here in the UK. Um,
Hmm.
Definitely for peace of mind, doing your research, going to see the schools.
Yes.
Um, speaking to other parents, pretty much the same thing you'll do in the UK or the US or Canada or
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria or Ghana or wherever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, we had a Zoom call with the head teacher of the Montessori school that my eldest is going to be starting at. So that was a good chance to ask her questions.
Yeah.
But we'd also, my son had been to a summer camp at that school before. And we also
Mm-hmm.
had a trial run of living in Grenada probably about 2015, so 6 years
Okay.
ago. So yeah, we're not just jumping in, we're kind of
Yeah.
dipping our toe in. And oh, someone said they'll be
Someone
homeschooling.
mentioned homeschooling.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is also another option that people can look into. And just tap into communities so that you
Mm,
can get insights from people on the ground, because not everything is online, right? Some things you need to talk to people who are actually on the ground, who are living there right now, to get the up-to-date information and kind of like the inside scoop. You know how there's some
yeah.
things that no one's going to put online, but you need to know, like, oh, this school is really great and this school not so good for us, if
Hmm.
you know what I mean. So I encourage people to find community any way that they can, whether it's through Facebook, following vlogs on YouTube. I mean, you have options, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like compared to when I first moved to Verona in 2001, like
Mm-hmm.
there was no real internet to, I mean, there was internet, but like no way to like follow someone on Instagram or,
Mm-hmm.
do this. So yeah, there's so
Yeah.
much, so many ways to connect that folks should really do it.
And not to be shy. I mean, not everyone's going to respond or everyone's not friendly necessarily, but I find that most people are. So it's, you know what I mean? I think it's best to just test the waters and reach out to a couple people versus being silent, trying to figure everything out on your own, because you will be away from home. You will be away from your core support system, but you'll need to build community abroad as well. Do you have any recommendations for like other resources? I mean, of course, your website, YouTube channel is excellent resource. Of course, I'm gonna mention the Xpat app. And for anyone's unfamiliar, that's an app for the Black community that lives abroad outside of their home country. But are there any other resources that you found to be really helpful as you are preparing for your new move abroad again?
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of my new move personally, I it's hard to say. There isn't that much in terms of Grenada specifically, but one
Mm.
place that has got me massively tempted is Jamaica because there's this
Yeah.
fantastic Facebook group, Black Expats and
Yeah.
Expats in Jamaica. And I always recommend people check that out because it's folks who've moved from everywhere sharing information on how to find accommodation, uh,
Mm-hmm.
how to open a bank account in less than a year, all the stuff that will frustrate you if you try to
Yes.
do it on your own. They're just really, really generous in sharing information and they're across the island. So I would highly recommend that. I think there's also a similar group for Barbados called
Okay.
Barbados, but I'll have a look.
Yeah, there's a Barbados group as well that I joined recently. I try to join all the groups just so I can have information for
Uh-huh.
the app. So yeah, there's one for Barbados that I think is really popular, and also the one in Jamaica that you mentioned as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because you'll find general groups, and like for Barbados, there is like a Barbados Digital Nomads group, but it's
Mhm.
not folks like us. At the time,
Yes,
you kind
exactly.
of people who get where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I'm normally in both groups. Like I'll be in a group that's for, everybody, and I'll be in a group that's catered to
Hmm.
African Americans or American. I mean, you know what I mean? Or just different,
Yeah,
sometimes only women. Like I join all the groups pretty much. And you get value in different ways from different ones. But I do think that being Black, I need perspectives from Black people, because how I
yeah,
move through the world, how I'm treated, how I'm received, how just like what the experience is going to be like. Of course, it's not the same for everyone, but there are some shared experiences based on race that I think a lot of us can appreciate having some insight into, and that's why I credit the platform, and I'm sure like credit your platform as well. It's just good to have a heads up, really, like to know that you're not alone. Can find
yes,
each other as well. Yeah.
definitely. And I forgot there's the one group that I have to credit. There's a Facebook group called Single Mums Unconventional Travel Itineraries. Not the catchiest title, but it's a
Yeah.
great for
Mhm.
encouraging single mothers to think
Okay.
beyond like, the limitations of what society says that they expect of you
Hmm.
and to
Hmm.
travel. You have people like in Southern Africa, people in the
Hmm.
Galapagos Islands, just kind of talking
Oh,
and saying
that's
like, this
dope.
is where I am. Do you want to meet up? I'm going to Morocco. Let's homeschool together. Um, so that's a really good resource for folks who happen to be parents and who also want to relocate. So I think that's really good for empowering you to
Yes.
let you know you can do it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up a travel group, because I think people assume like travel groups are complementary to expat groups in the sense that they're another way for to find resources. So don't sleep on like, oh, this is a travel group. Like, no, the travel group can help you too, because you can find some
Hmm.
insights and people to connect with through the travel group. So, and just like-minded people who, even if they're not going to be there permanently, some people are like, what do you call them, slow travelers? Like they do the
Right.
digital nomad stuff, so they may be somewhere for only 3-4 months at a time, but they will know the ropes and what's going on in the area as well, where to go, how
Yeah.
to pay less money when you're trying to find your rent, find a place to rent or find a house to purchase. So it's just, man, community has saved me so much money on my move abroad. So I'm an advocate for it, because the things, the trouble that I would go through doing it on my own would be like such a waste of time. So
Totally.
yeah. And what
And
would you
obviously,
say? Mm-hmm. Sorry, what were you gonna
no.
say?
And possibly there are things that you might encounter that might almost be enough to put you off. But
Yes.
having community, one, they can forewarn you. Two, if it goes wrong, you have that support group, which is
Mm-hmm.
so important when you're far away. It really, really
Mm-hmm.
is.
I agree. Like setting up a bank account in the UK, insane. Like it's
Really?
insane. Like yes, it is. Like I'm like I feel like I'm applying to be a part of FBI. Like this is crazy. And even here, like same thing. Just glad that I have people I can reach out to, and get some recommendations of banks to go to, and referrals. But you can't do anything without your bank account. But it's like if they make the bank account process difficult, like, oh, you need a permanent address. I'm like, well, I can't get one because you guys won't set up my bank account. It's like this never ending journey. So yeah, it
Didn't
can
your
be
wife
a lot
help you
sometimes.
out with,
Hmm.
didn't
Sorry,
your
what was
employer
saying?
didn't your employer help you out with that, with setting up your bank
Oh,
account?
not well. The first move, I had temp housing. Not
Ah,
that was just for like the first couple of weeks, and you don't get like after that you're on your own.
oh
And then
wow.
here I'm here on my own solo dolo, so like not with the company.
Right,
And so just figuring it out on my own now with the move with Lisbon, it's been totally different from my move to London.
right.
And really interesting because it's COVID, so it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
So
my permanent move abroad, or long-term move abroad was to Milan. But then I was joining a company, so like finding
okay,
accommodation, giving me help to open a bank account, getting the permesso
yes.
di soggiorno. They helped with all of that. But when you're doing it solo, you're
Totally
completely on your own.
different. Yeah, and this is a good segue into the remote work part, because I think that's why a lot of people were interested. Some of the questions I was getting was about like visas and like
Hmm.
how are you even finding these jobs. So if we can kind of step into that, like to give people some insight about resources, like where to find remote work, how to even like where do I start? If I'm someone who has no remote work experience and I'm really interested in finding remote work so that I can have some location independence in regards to where I live, what would you say is like a good starting point?
Yeah, well, and I think if we were having this conversation 2 or 3 years ago, it would really be kind of like a leap in the dark to think, okay, what might remote
Mm-hmm.
work look like? But I think the COVID situation with so many people working from home has really shifted the way in which many, many industries are going. So
Mm-hmm.
even if it comes to being a nurse, people are
Yes.
saying, like, I've got like 20 years experience as a nurse in the US and I want to move to Jamaica, what can I do? Well, actually, there are like thousands of remote work jobs available for nurses, whether it's
Mhm.
telehealth or other
Yes.
other sort of roles. I think just thinking a little bit more broadly about what are the skills that I have and what's available. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to, like working in a call center. There are many, many jobs that you can do that don't require you to physically be in an office. Um,
Mhm.
so I think there's one kind of looking at your skill set and kind of just broadening your parameters a little bit more and
Mhm.
finding, okay, what would the online or the remote version of this look like?
Yes.
But also, if you are open to a career shift, looking at some of the other avenues that might be available. So whether it's I don't know, bookkeeping online or teaching
Yeah.
English online or any of the kind of really simple entry level roles, those are always an option. And I think it kind of depends on which destination you're moving to as to
Yes.
how big your budget is going to need to be, because being in Barbados teaching English is probably going to be quite
Good luck.
expensive.
Yeah, it's good luck. Yeah.
If you're looking at moving to Belize or a country that's more affordable, then that definitely can be done. And I know there's also someone who is in Jamaica teaching English online. And that's, I would say, like if you are single and can live on a
Mhm.
budget, that's the easiest job ever. Because I
Mhm.
knew that moving moving abroad, and I knew that people were going to be asking me like, oh, what do you do? What are some options? I tried out teaching English online to Chinese kids, and it's so easy. It's the
Yeah.
easiest thing ever. You just kind of do your TEFL online.
Yes.
Groupon, I paid like maybe $40 for it.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and a TEFL is a what is it? Teaching
TESOL.
oh
Yeah, what do
TESOL.
you
I'm
guys
sorry. I
call
think I
it?
said TEFL. Yeah, sorry. I think I
I
put
say
something else. There's
TEFL
TEFL.
too, but I
Oh,
think
okay, okay.
Americans say TESOL. Well, I mean,
Oh,
teaching
okay.
teaching,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's just teaching English as a foreign language. That's what TEFL stands for. I don't, or maybe teaching English as a second language is TESOL. Either way,
yeah,
this is a certificate for anyone, because I'm not sure if everyone on the listening, tuning in is aware of what this certificate is. It essentially is a way for you to get certified to teach English to students, and it's a way for you to do it online as well. And I know of a program where you can do it for $350, and I've heard of cheaper ones, like you said, on Groupon. You can get a
way too.
certification.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
money. Don't do that. No, but I
Yeah.
think to dip your toe in the water, obviously, if you love it so much and you think, okay, I've done it for a couple of years, maybe I want to move to, I know we're talking about the Caribbean, but maybe I want to move to the Arab Emirates and get paid
Hmm.
loads of money, tax free, then you can always pay more to do a more well recognized one.
Yes.
And because you're teaching in person, I think it requires a different skill set. But I think there's so many of these companies out there
Yeah.
that, and actually, they train you on the job. So once you have the certificate and you start teaching with them, a number of them will have training modules that
Okay.
you can work your way through. So whether it's a course on how understanding how to engage Chinese teenage boys through manga, or how to, you know, specific type of conjugation of a verb, like they'll go super, super niche. So thinking that
Okay.
you know everything in advance through the TESOL or TEFL, yeah,
Mhm.
don't stress yourself out. Um, but yeah, I think that that's like really easy entry level.
Yes.
If you're single, no kids, and you just want to escape, that's
Yes.
it's a really easy option. I think there's other things like web development,
Yes.
computer programming. Like if you want a
Mhm.
decent salary,
Website
um,
design,
right?
social media manager. I mean, there's
Uh-huh.
so many things. Director of strategic partnerships, where you're like managing partnerships, all these things where like you don't have to physically be present. It's options. I think, and now with COVID, more jobs that were not remote before are now, at least there's an option for remote work, right?
Right.
Um, One of the things that I
Yeah.
wanted to point out though, as we're talking about remote work, in the same vein that we're talking, I'm going to caveat it with this: not all remote jobs can be worked overseas because of
Yes.
data privacy rules and things like that. Sometimes they don't want, you can't be out of the country and accessing certain platforms. So
Hmm.
it's really important to, and they can normally know where you're working based on like IP address. So something that I just want to share as a caveat is, as we're talking about all of this, remote work, please understand the rules of your specific situation. Just because you have a remote job does not mean that legally you can work outside of the country that job is, the company's based in. Yeah.
Yeah. And a number of the remote hiring websites will be quite specific about the region that they want you to be in.
Hmm.
So that kind of gives you a heads up. And I know I probably shouldn't say this, but I am because I upload it on YouTube. But a number of the teaching English sites will pay you according to where you're based. So
Oh,
if
okay.
you're in the UK or the US or North America, they'll pay you decently. But if they think you're in Southeast Asia or Africa, you'll get like a fraction of the money. So that's something
Mm,
to be aware of in terms of at least where you register and where your bank account is. That's something to
yes.
take into account as well.
And I can see that Shireen is on. She's at Girl Not Afraid. She mentioned like for tax reasons as well. Yes, that's a very, very important thing to consider, because for people who are from the U.S., whether regardless of where you're working or whatever, you still have to file your US taxes. You may not owe, but you still have to file. So even if you're not making money in the US, it's just something to be
Mm.
mindful of. And there's actually a tax, there's going to be, for Americans, there's going to be a tax talk through Blacksit Global on Thursday. So if you go to Blacksit Global on Instagram, there's a tax talk happening on Thursday. I don't have the exact details, but just want to throw that out since we're on the topic of it. But that's specifically for Americans. Do you know any good resources? Because the tax question always comes up, but it's so specific, and it depends on what's your home country. What is your, abroad country that you're going to be in? Are you as a nomad on a tourist visa or on a digital nomad visa? Like there's
Right.
so many factors. It's always a hard question to answer.
Yeah. No, I think
Mhm.
like if we're looking at the destinations in the Caribbean that do have digital nomad visas,
Hmm.
each one of them will go into the specifications of the tax arrangements that they have. Um, but yeah, I am fortunately I'm have British citizenship as well as Grenadian citizenship,
Oh,
and there's a double
nice.
taxation agreement. So tax
Yes.
probably isn't at the forefront of my mind, but I think absolutely it's
Mhm.
a question that gets asked quite often. So if anyone wants to go into more detail on that, I can definitely try and point them in the right direction. But yeah,
Yes.
definitely think something to check beforehand.
Oh
Not.
yeah, beforehand you should understand what the implications are and what things you need to
Hmm.
consider. Because I do know that, like for some people, if you're operating on a as a digital nomad, not on a digital nomad visa, sometimes they're on tourist visas, which means you just pay as if you're in the U.S. only and you're a tourist. You get what I'm trying to
Okay.
say? So it's really complicated, and I think it's important for people to understand their unique situation and to talk to a tax professional, not people
Hmm.
like me online. So just
Right.
yeah, let me caveat that for someone's like Charlotte told me. Like, no, I didn't say anything. So, but yeah, it's the tax part is important, and it's something that like it's a factor, but I don't want people to be so scared of it that they are overwhelmed that they never even look into the option
Mm.
of like remote work and digital work. Um, from the perspective of people finding, I think I know people are looking for remote work so that mostly they can go and live abroad or whatever they want to do. But I always say you can start your remote work while you're still in your home country, so you can get a
That's
feel
what
for
I've
it.
done.
Yes.
That's what I've been doing for the past 2 years. So yeah, I started
Yes.
off
Hmm.
teaching Chinese, teaching
Hmm.
Chinese, teaching English to Chinese people, and now I now do race and diversity consulting for blue chip
Hmm.
companies, and it's all virtual.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, guys, I've been doing this for the past while. I happen to be moving to the Caribbean, but don't worry, I'll still be up. I'll still
Hmm.
be doing my hours, and it makes absolutely no difference. I still do the same role. It just means getting up a little bit, like 5 hours earlier, which is a slight pain.
Hmm.
But earning UK money, and I think that also
Yes.
folks need to be aware of is when people say to me, like, lots of people get in touch saying, "How do I find work in the Caribbean?" I'm like, do you really understand what working for a local company is going to mean in terms of how much you're likely to be earning,
Hmm.
adjusting to the culture? I
Hmm.
think those two things are elements really, really worth considering, because the cost of living in the Caribbean is high, but the amount that the average person earns really isn't that much. So when you
Yes.
equate what you're used to what you're being paid locally, I think that definitely is a factor that folks might want to reflect on in the rare instance that they are even eligible to work in the Caribbean. Because I think quite often
Yeah.
as Westerners we think that we can go anywhere and work, but we don't realize that that doesn't work here. Like someone from Jamaica can't just rock up in the US and get a job, right? Because there's
Yeah.
restrictions in place. So I think that's also to be something to be aware of. In that, unless you have an incredibly skilled and sought after work qualification or work experience,
Hmm.
the probability is that you're not going to be able to work in the Caribbean. I think in most islands, if someone wants to employ a foreigner, the job has to be advertised for a certain number of weeks in the local paper.
Hmm.
All of the applications then have to be sent to the government, and then the employer has to say why they've chosen to hire a foreigner over a
Over
local.
someone who's local. Yes, absolutely. And the UK had a similar, when I was back in 2014, similar thing where they had to advertise, show that no one else could do the job, and
Mm-hmm.
then before they could offer it to me. So this is not uncommon. I don't think it's
Right,
just for the Caribbean. I think it's to be fair to, people who are from the country. So, and I
right,
understand that. But if
yeah,
you're doing remote work, that's fine, right? It's not like you know
absolutely,
what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And I'm glad you raised the point about local wages. So this is the same thing here in Lisbon, Portugal, or in Portugal. The local pay here is actually quite low compared to what Americans would make, right? So if you come here and try to find a local job here, you may have a hard time making the cost of living. I mean, keeping up with the cost of living. But if you're coming over with an American salary, you will probably in more cases than not be okay. So it's just really important, like when you're making these key decisions, that you're aware of your specific situation. Like, how are you earning money? What currency are you earning money in? That also matters. Because sometimes when you're doing, the translation from, euros to dollars to euros, whatever, you need to understand that those rates fluctuate.
yeah,
And you can go from making 2,000 US dollars a month, which may translate to 1,500 over here in euros, but then because of rate fluctuations, the next one it could be 1,300. You get what I mean? The same
right,
2,000 US. So it's just please keep these things in mind because it's important, right? It's about your budget and managing your money as well. If you guys have any questions too, because I want this to be interactive, feel free to ask questions in the questions box or in the chat. I hope I haven't missed any questions in the chat.
I just think
Someone
what happened.
asked,
Oh, wow.
so Nikhil asked, did you stay within your mainstream system or go completely freelance?
Me, I had a proper job for about 18 months
Mm.
2 years ago, but I've been freelance since 2009.
Oh, okay,
So
nice.
actually, I'm the
Mhm.
wrong person to like, how do I get a job? Because I'm very much about like be independent. Um,
Yes.
yeah, it would take a lot of money for me to work for a company full time.
I understand. So what would you say, like from, the perspective when you are freelancing, when you are doing remote work, healthcare comes up, right? And for people in the US, your healthcare is tied to your job. So it's kind of scary going freelance or remote. But if you're in a country, somewhere like the UK or even here in Portugal, your insurance is not tied, health insurance is not tied to your job. So what would you like? What advice or resources when it comes to the health insurance or something that people need to consider when they're thinking about remote work and how they can still get health insurance
Yeah,
accomplished?
see, again, I'm like not the best person to talk to about it because I'm a Brit, so we don't pay for
Yeah.
healthcare. Like everything is free or like minimal. There's a minimal amount to pay for going to the dentist. You don't pay to have operations. Like it's just.
Mhm.
Um, but I definitely know that in Grenada. So I've been to hospital for a burnt arm in Grenada. I've been to a medical clinic for a dog bite in Grenada. I've been pregnant in Grenada and have had midwife appointments. So I
Mhm.
feel like I've had a fairly good overview as to what the system is. I've also had an aunt who's been in intensive care while in Grenada. Um,
Mm.
so the quality of care that's available for free if you do happen to go back as someone, either as someone who has a Grenadian passport or if you're a CARICOM person who happens to be living um, in in Grenada or any other Caribbean country. I think there is ways that you can access the public health system. Um, so for standard procedures, I would say it's okay, but in case of an emergency,
Mhm.
absolutely making sure that you have private health insurance. I think for
Yes.
peace of mind is absolutely essential. Um,
Yes.
and there are a number of providers that you can access who will offer you private medical care. So that definitely is available. But what happens in those instances, they would typically pay to repatriate you either to Barbados, Trinidad, or back to the US.
Okay.
Um,
Like something that's severe, intense. Yeah.
yeah, or like you need an operation.
Mhm.
Like I have a friend who had like a motorcycle accident and he was taken to Barbados. His dad said, if that had happened in Grenada, he probably wouldn't be walking. So that's probably not the best advert for Grenada, but it is an advert for taking out proper health insurance. But again, from my experience having stuff that wasn't insignificant, it was fine. And
Yes.
the care that I received from midwives in Grenada was far more genuine and less rushed in caring than what I
Okay.
received in the UK. So
Nice. And how would you talk about the quality of life? Because, sunshine, food, like these things, and just like the mental capacity, space that you can be in when you're abroad. What would you say compared to your home country, which for you is the UK? You compared it to? I'm
I
laughing because I
mean,
already know the answer most of the
right.
time
And
to
like, what
this.
am I doing? How do I put it into words other than a laugh? Um, quality of life.
Mhm.
I mean, I've got to caveat that as someone who is able to earn in British pounds and,
Mhm.
have a certain level of education and network. So obviously
Mhm.
the experience for me in terms of quality of life is very different for a local Grenadian who, I mean, I think
Mhm.
unemployment at the moment is 40%. Um,
Okay.
Hunger, poverty. So absolutely, I'm acknowledging my privilege when it comes to talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
quality of life. Um, but to me, there's no comparison. There's no
Mhm.
comparison. I mean, I think in my 20s, the idea of living in Grenada is something that I never could have considered because I was all about like jet setting, having fun, partying, what shoes I was
Mhm.
wearing. But now I really don't care about any of that. And to just
Mhm.
have space, have my children be able to roam free, to be part of a community, to have people look out after you, to not have to deal with like racist nonsense, to
Mhm.
look like me everywhere. then
Hmm.
that's when you talk about the sea and the weather and the mountains and the food and that. Yeah, there's yeah,
The good life, yeah.
it's amazing,
Yeah.
but you've got to be ready for it. I think.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm imagining people watching this kind of get what the Caribbean is about, and if they wanted something super glitzy and fast paced, they would not. They would probably be on another interview.
Hmm.
Um, but I just think, yeah, like being connected to nature, taking a slower pace. Like obviously, it comes with cons, like generally
Hmm.
not great customer service.
Yeah.
But
Oh my gosh.
I
Like,
think, yeah, you just
seriously.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
it's a trade off,
Yeah.
and you decide what matters.
Absolutely, because even with like the play, like where I'm at now, it's more laid back, right? But when it comes to like really important things, I'm like, oh, it's so laid back, and I need this done, like my residency permit, like appointment and things like that. So you have to take the good with the bad, and something
Mm,
that could be initially great in the context of something else could be like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare, right? So the laid back atmosphere when you're just enjoying living life, fine. But when it's like administrative things such as like visas and things like that, and they're just taking their time, you got to get used to it. It's a different way
yeah,
of life, and you can't come with your, in my case, American expectations because it's a different culture, and you have to take it both ways. You know what I mean? Like you can't only
absolutely.
like the nonchalant, laid back atmosphere when it's in your favor. So it is something to
Yeah.
keep in mind.
Like going to the
Yeah.
bank, taking me
Hmm.
an hour and a half. Trying to, for me, I'm like contacting high commissions and ministries for like simple information that people here need. And it's like, okay, we'll get back to you like 3 days, 5 days, a week later. You know,
Hmm.
that's kind of just how it is at times. So you just take deep
Yes.
breaths and
You just have to bring patience with you. Have patience, have patience, have patience, and understanding and grace. Give people grace, including yourself. So one of the questions from Passport Paris, she asks, how do you recommend finding a place to stay while working for a US based company if housing isn't covered? So, like, do you recommend staying in Airbnb initially? I think housing is a big concern for people because they never know, like, what neighborhood should I stay in? Should I stay in an Airbnb or a hotel? It's like all these questions.
I hadn't even thought of staying in a hotel. I would definitely say to start off with, probably like for the first two 2 weeks to 4 weeks, I would suggest staying in an Airbnb in an area that you're interested in, just
Hmm.
so that you get a chance to feel what it's like in
Hmm.
practice. Um, but yeah, as soon as possible, get out of an Airbnb. I mean, some people have really good tips for being able to negotiate with your Airbnb landlord in order to
Hmm.
get a reduction for a longer term stay. But I
Hmm.
think definitely the number of folks who've reached out to me looking for suitable accommodation in Grenada, what I'm seeing on Airbnb is like massively overpriced.
Okay.
Like, I think it's because people aren't understanding how to adapt from attracting tourists who are there
Hmm.
for a week and not really doing the conversions in their mind versus someone who's there for like 6 months to 12 months and is possibly renting out their home back home and is able to see like, okay,
Hmm.
well, this is my mortgage, this is what I'm paying you. This definitely isn't working out.
Hmm.
Um, one of the things I would suggest, at least from my experience of looking at Grenada, is to look at the properties that are available for long-term rent with estate agents. Um,
Okay.
they typically they would be on for at least 12 months. But
Okay.
given the situation with the pandemic, with far fewer tourists coming, and in Grenada's case, um, a large part of income comes from medical students. There's a U.S. medical
Okay.
university on the island,
Okay.
and they typically take up most of the accommodation, but they haven't been there for the past 18 months. So landlords
Mm.
are and I'm going to get hate mail for this, but like
Mm.
people how to negotiate down. But honestly, if their properties are empty and they need someone to stay and you're going to be there for 6 months, I
Mm-hmm.
think definitely approaching estate agents that way is the way to get something that's more affordable. Um, and also looking in local newspapers. So
Okay.
properties
I never
that
thought
are
about that. That's really smart.
really old school.
Yeah,
we,
no, that's really smart.
yeah,
Yeah.
properties advertised to local Grenadians tend
Mm-hmm.
to be advertised in the newspapers. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing that you might have to work with is that um, they'll be way more affordable, but you might need to spend like a good few hundred US just getting it up to your personal taste. So whether it's like a
Mm-hmm.
little painting or changing
Mm-hmm.
the blinds and curtains.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a way to get something that's affordable, but then tweaking it a bit so it meets your
Yes.
personal.
No, that's really smart, and I've never thought about that. But that is how, like, that's how you used to
But
do it beforehand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's smart. And the other thing too, like that you mentioned, is sometimes you will find an Airbnb host who is willing to give something to you long term, but you just do an initial maybe 2 weeks. You know
mm,
what I mean, through Airbnb, and then once you realize you actually like the property, you had a chance to check it out some, and get a level of comfort. You can, check with the owner and see if they're willing to do a longer term, if the space is available, and for a different price. And I've done that before in London, and it worked out really well. And I've also experienced personally, because of COVID, prices being cheaper for rents, that I know in spaces that would normally be much higher. So yes, COVID has been horrible, but in some cases, similar to how we now have more remote jobs, there are some positive that had come out of the pandemic. So just something to consider for those of you who are kind of on the fence. This actually might be
yeah,
good timing. Yeah.
definitely doing your
Mm-hmm.
like take your time to shop around. I think a home is
Mm-hmm.
such a big commitment, as is the neighborhood that you're in. So rather than kind of right, I've got to move and like land the perfect place and then being stuck, like
Mm-hmm.
do 2 weeks or do 4 weeks. And if that neighborhood isn't right, you can always do another 4 weeks somewhere else. Because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think the quality of life and peace of mind, like knowing that you love where you live. Maybe it's because I've got kids, but that's
Mm-hmm.
massively important to me. So giving
No,
yourself the
it's critical, especially now with COVID, when I spend a lot more time indoors than I normally would. So like me being comfortable here was so important. And I think there's a lot of, like, how do I say this? Traveling somewhere and how you experience a place traveling and living somewhere is different. So for me, I live in the city and it's really loud. And for some people, that would not work. Like it can work when you're traveling because it's short term, whatever. But like, do you really want to live somewhere that's loud? Like the noise doesn't bother me, but I know plenty of people who would never be able to live in this loud neighborhood, So like
right.
think about that too. Think about various things, because even if you've traveled somewhere and had a certain experience, don't just make the assumption that that will transfer to your living abroad experience.
Yeah, same in Grenada, like place that you love because the music is fantastic. To be like trying to get to sleep at 2 in the morning and that same music is playing and you've got to get to work the next day.
Yeah.
Completely different experience.
It's so different. There's a guy who plays the violin outside of my bathroom window, and like it doesn't bother me, but I was like, I could see that being really annoying. When I close the window, it's fine, but if I want some fresh air, it's like I get personal violin music. It
Is he
just
good?
comes with he is, but there's one that's not who plays sometimes too. So, yeah, it just depends. But this is something you really it's loud, right? You have to consider and be aware of. So think about that. Think about things like, things in the US that are common for us, like it's a given, like air conditioning,
Hmm.
washer and dryer, dishwasher. Some of these things are like a given. Like even like I know in London, like I've had a place before, a studio that did not have a freezer. I know that sounds
Wow.
crazy, but it had a little, it had one of the little small things, not a proper freezer. So like, don't just assume with I'm saying specifically, I'm speaking specifically to American people, like just don't just assume that these things are gonna be there. Really check and look at the amenities, because it may not be the same.
Yeah,
One of
definitely
the
AC
Yeah.
in the Caribbean. Definitely AC in Grenada, unfortunately. That doesn't always come as standard. I hate AC, so I'm okay. But I know for
Hmm.
Americans, what? No AC in a hot.
I won't live anywhere without AC or heat. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? Because I can't sleep when I'm hot. So like, you get what I
Wow.
mean, right? You really have to
Yeah.
think about like your specific situation, and then put your budget should match, or think about your budget with respect to the lifestyle that you desire,
Mm.
right? Because in almost any country, anywhere, you can be on the really low, inexpensive spectrum and the really high one. So people are like, "Oh, how much does it cost?" I'm like, "What's your lifestyle?" Because I don't know. Like it can be as low as 1,000 a month. It could be as high as three. Like I don't. That's a big range, but I don't know what your lifestyle is. So I think people
Yeah.
should do the research according to their needs.
Definitely. And I
Um,
think so many levels. Another thing that I found
mhm.
useful, I'd seen a property that I'd actually fallen in love with. And I sort of sat down and took the time to map out my perfect day, like the schedule. And what I
Mhm.
realized was that I'd be spending 45 minutes a day commuting to the town, which
Oh
is
yeah.
right. I'm not moving to Grenada to commute. So even though it was lovely and like on holiday,
Mhm.
it would have been a great place to be to do that
Mhm.
every day in the school run. Like little things like that, things that you just assume, oh, it's great, it's beautiful, it has great views. But think about, okay, in practice, what is this going to what is this going to look like? How is this going to work with my actual routine, my actual reality? I think that's just where
Yes.
you got some clear no-nos.
That's such a valid point because you know what I mean. Like, okay, yeah, you found a perfect property, but let's say it's a little bit further out. But if you're coming into the city every 5 seconds, then the money you're saving on rent, you
Mm,
actually aren't because it's transportation in and out of the city. So it's something to think about because, like you said, what are your needs? What is your day to day? How often are you going to be commuting? Like, where are the kids' schools at? Where's your job if you're physically somewhere or whatever? So that's all important. Or even
yeah.
grocery stores, proximity to grocery stores, like that's so important. Um, that's something that I think I didn't think about in one of the areas that I've lived out here. And even like if I have to walk through a neighborhood, like let's say my neighborhood is nice, but I have to walk through a neighborhood where I don't feel that comfortable. Like all these things matter. So it's
Mm,
important to like talk to people on the ground and physically, if you can visit, visit. If not, you know, because of COVID, you can always do a discovery visit, but like be a part of these communities. So you can get some insights.
yeah.
um,
And
let
I
me
think it
see.
seems like common sense, but for some
Yeah.
reason, when it comes to being abroad, there's like an element of magic and romance, but it's really unromantic when you're
Yeah.
walking through.
Yeah. And I'm the worst to talk about because I always show all the good stuff. 'Cause I'm like, I love it here, but I do. So it's kind of hard. I'm like, y'all need to talk to people who can give both insights, okay?
Mhm.
I'm missing a couple questions here. A Spice Girl asks, are there any concessions for returning nationals in terms of allowances for, oh, like bringing over your things like furniture, cars, or if you plan on building a home in Grenada? Or
Yes,
Grenada,
there
sorry.
are.
Mm-hmm.
There are. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what the figure is. I want to say 20%. I know for cars, it's only for
Mm-hmm.
cars that are less than 10 or 5 years old,
Oh,
maybe
okay.
five actually, because they're trying to have this really strong environmental push.
Okay.
Um, oh, I'll use Instagram. I just got something popping up. But yeah, I'm not actually using my concession now.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
trying to hold off. But definitely, Spice Girl, send me a message and I can send that information over to you. But there definitely are concessions. I can't remember the
Oh,
exact
awesome. Okay. And then Nikhil asks, have you received any pushback from locals due to you being from abroad?
pushback. In what pushback against me being there, or what sort of pushback? Tell me more.
Well, I mean, I don't, and Nikhil, you can add more, but
Raquel.
I know, for example, like sometimes people really don't like foreigners in their country. And so I guess pushback would be in the sense of like attitudes towards you once they hear your accent and realize you're not from here. Do people treat you differently? I would maybe assume. And Nikhil, correct
Mm,
me if I'm wrong.
yeah, I mean, I
Mhm.
think so. Despite my accent, I can't even. Yeah, I
Mhm.
can't even fake a Grenadian accent. I do.
Mhm.
I am Grenadian. I hold a Grenadian passport, so there isn't really so much that they can say about me being there.
Mhm.
Think, I think it depends how you are. If you kind of go there with a kind of like, I'm British and I know best and I'm going to tell you how to run your life, then obviously, justifiably, they're going to be like,
Mhm. Mhm.
and how are you going with your colonizer mindset? Um,
Yes.
I don't mind that. I think it really depends on how you are and where you are. I know that
Mhm.
my dad lives in the south of the island, so we're originally from the north, which is much more rural and country. Um, and I think that even if your car isn't one that they know, people will stare and be like outsider, not in a bad way, just out
Mhm.
of curiosity. Um,
Yes.
I don't honestly, can I say that I've received pushback? Um, no, but I think I'm quite down to earth and quite humble. I
Yes,
kind of,
I'm gonna say, I think because you're down to earth, you're probably not going to experience that. But
yeah,
like you said, it's attitude and how you present yourself. And in general, you just need to have a respect for the country that you're in.
yeah.
I see this a lot in expat chats and communities. You know, people like complaining about things, and I'm like, well, if you wanted things to be just like America, you should probably stay there. I mean, I'm just gonna be honest. Like, you shouldn't go somewhere and have those expectations that things are gonna be the exact same. And so you do need to be open minded because I think those attitudes are what probably irritate the locals, right? Like, you're in our country, you're a guest, you know, respect it, you know,
Right.
respect the norms, respect the culture and the people, and pay your dues, you know, pay your taxes. Like, don't be over here freeloading off the systems and not contributing in any way. So,
Right. And the same things that we say about immigrants. I mean, because we're ultimately immigrants, right? We say
mhm.
expats, but we're immigrants. So
Yeah,
the same
yeah.
things we say about immigrants in our country,
Mhm.
like that's kind of what we would expect.
Yeah.
um, overseas. But yeah, I mean, I think from women, I'm going to get in even more trouble. Caribbean
Mm-hmm.
women, or Grenadian women, at times can be a little bit funny, especially to Brit. I think American women, they don't mind so much. British women
Mm-hmm.
seem to trigger them for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that I'm not fully Grenadian. You know, I mean, I don't expect to be fully accepted. I'm kind of in limbo, being not neither
Mm-hmm.
British, neither fully Grenadian, and I'm fine with that. I don't need people to like embrace me fully because I'm not fully one of them. So I'm happy. You kind of learn how to live in this liminal space, and I'm cool with that.
Yes. No, that's awesome. This is a really good question from Mama's Cradle Doula. I might be saying it wrong. Have you found yourself having to set boundaries around expectations? For example, being seen as a foreigner in this idea that you have money.
Hmm.
That's a really
Um.
good yes. I have. I'm answering because I'm like, yes, you deal with that. You deal with that abroad. It's frustrating because everyone assumes you have money. I'm like, I do not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I I think I don't drive a fancy car. I don't dress
Mm-hmm.
like you know from Jamaica. Like generally Caribbean people, they dress really well and like I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I'm like raggedy. So you know,
No, I don't really.
people. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so because I've been going there so long, I don't hang out in. I mean, maybe once a month I might go to a fancy bar, but generally I'm more comfortable in a
Mm-hmm.
rough shop than in somewhere like
Okay.
some high society place. And all of they in Grenada, they're really big on like the Rotary Society and Lions Club.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do any of that. I find that super boring. So
Yeah.
the
I
people who
understand.
know me,
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, they quite quickly understand that I don't have a lot of money. And I think, yeah, but I think it can. Can you find have you found yourself having to set boundaries around expectations? I
Yeah.
think it can be useful for new
Mm-hmm.
because I've got a rival here. For people who for new situations to be
Mm-hmm.
really clear and to take the time to explain, I think can be useful. Because I think sometimes people just don't know. They just don't know how expensive it is. Like my electricity bill is probably as much as the average person pays in rent in Grenada. You know,
Okay.
stuff
Okay.
like that that
Yeah.
people don't really understand. They kind of think some people think you arrive and you've just got a barrel full of money, but that's not reality. And I think people soon um, understand. You keep asking questions. I've got a play group in here.
Uh, no, no worries. We only have about 5 minutes left. And the time does go by really fast. But most of I have experienced that even when we return home and we go back to Jamaica for visits, it's like our family there sometimes thinks like, oh, you guys are rich because you're an American. I'm like, no, we're working class, like literally working class. So I think this expectation that somehow because you're coming from a more developed nation that you have like this excess of money it is something that you do have to deal with, even with family. I've personally experienced that, and I've also experienced it as an expat, where people are trying to charge us more, whether it's when I'm purchasing or getting not purchasing a house, but like renting the space or things like that. People just assuming that you have more money, and I'm like, nah, I'm working, and I'm working like working class. So, I have so many more questions, but this went by really fast. Before we end, like, what would be the best advice you could give to anyone who's interested? Because a lot of people they're just scared, right? The unknown is scary. The propaganda that they've seen online may make them think that it's not feasible. What advice would you give? It's okay.
I was having to close the doors after my
No worries.
stormed in. What advice would I give to people?
Or what advice would you give to yourself before you even started planning and preparing for this journey?
What advice would I give? I guess I don't know. Have patience. I think I've definitely been very eager for this to happen. But to be honest, I think I knew that I would move to Grenada the moment I found out I was pregnant, which is 11 years ago. So it's
Mm-hmm.
taken a lot longer than expected to fully realize it completely. Um, but I think when you're doing something for the right reasons, it happens. It
Yes.
happens probably in ways that might be different from how you might want it to. But
Mm-hmm.
if it's meant to be, it will be. Um, I don't think I've ever had fears about relocating because it's something that I've done before. But I
Mm-hmm.
understand that many people who reach out to me that there is that thing of definitely knowing that they want to leave, but yet not knowing how to make that leap from the want to the doing, and that
Hmm.
can feel like really huge. Um, but what's the worst that can happen? You don't
Yes.
like it, you come back, or
Yes.
you learn
That's
a
the thing.
lesson,
Bring,
like,
yes. Plan enough financially to be able to get back home. I would say that to people, and trust the process. Don't let people fool you who are abroad that this was an overnight decision. A lot of
mm,
us really have been wanting to move abroad for a long time before we actually moved abroad. So I know sometimes you're looking at someone's like day 5,000 and comparing it to your day one and feeling overwhelmed, but like it's a process. You got to trust it, trust the timing of the universe and yourself, and your gut instincts about where you belong and when you should go there. So I would say to kind of try to put the fear aside, because it's a really beautiful life when there's a certain level of liberty and confidence that you get through the process of moving abroad that I don't know if I can explain it other than you just have to experience it to understand it. But I personally
yeah.
feel more confident after being abroad and more liberated. I don't know, like, what else you have experienced as a result of living abroad as well.
Oh gosh, I think it just completely shifted the way in which I saw the world, especially living in a country where
Mm-hmm.
you have to speak another language, like being in Italy. Like you
Mm-hmm.
just empathize a lot more. You just
Mm-hmm.
you feel more connected. You understand yourself differently. I would, yeah, I would. My son is 10 and he already has dreams of moving to Japan, and I'm like, do it,
That is
do it.
awesome. I love that. That is beautiful too. Just the fact that like that's realistic and tangible for him,
Mm.
very realistic, right? So empowering your children as well, which I know we didn't talk as much about, having kids abroad, but I mean having kids and moving abroad, but like you're empowering them through your own action, through their own experiences, right? They're gonna
I hope
use
so.
this world. Yeah.
Or they might just be like, I'm never going to move. I'm going to stay in one place. But who knows? At least they'll have seen something different, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
think, yeah, that thing. People are always afraid of the worst case scenario. But generally, think about what the worst case scenario has been like for you in your life and how have you overcome that. That probably isn't going to be any different if you encounter the worst case scenario overseas. Like nothing is irreplaceable or irreparable. I mean, I guess life is. But aside from that, it's probably not going to be as bad as you think.
Yes, yeah. And before we head out, anything else you want to leave people with? How can we support, follow, be a part of the community that you have? What's the easiest way to stay connected?
Yeah, the best way to stay connected is to subscribe over to the YouTube channel. I typically do weekly interviews with folks who've made the move to other Caribbean countries so you can understand the process through them, and send them any questions you have. And also check out the Exodus Collective website. We're actually setting up a program for folks who are considering working remotely from Grenada because they're just about to launch a digital nomad visa.
Mhm.
So if anyone is interested in coming out to Grenada, experiencing it with a view to perhaps spending a longer time, there's a sign up form over on the website. So I mean, I'm massively biased, but it's an awesome, amazing country. But come check it out for yourself. Come check it out for yourself and tell me I'm wrong.
Yes. And I can echo the sentiments of like just there's so much information. I did tag it's the X's Collective, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just want to make sure I put that in there correctly. I just typed it in the chat. Check it out. It's a lot of information. I love your YouTube interviews. They're very insightful, and I think it's nice because it's like a variety of. It's not like people have so many different. You've had digital nomads on. You have people who are teaching, people who are like creatives, if you know what I mean. So that's really awesome to get those various experiences so you can start to see it, it start to be more tangible for people what the options are for them to be abroad or to do remote work, and just give people a resource, so they can reach out to someone. So don't be shy. If people are on these platforms, more than likely they're open to people reaching out to them. So take advantage of that. Like, hey, I saw your YouTube channel, or hey, I saw your IG live, and reach out. It definitely helps to have community. So I could go on for a while, but I know you have to wrap up. I just appreciate, the grace and the platform that you have. You're just so calm and easy to talk to. So
Oh,
I
bless.
really appreciate it because I think for anyone who's, thinking about moving abroad, your resource, the research that you have is very useful, but also just, like I said, seeing people doing, you can go abroad, even if you have children, like don't limit yourself and just, take advantage of the people who are available and the resources if you're really serious about it. Any final words before we head
Yeah, no,
out?
it's been a pleasure to connect with you. I've loved following your journey, the launch of the Xpat app, which is an awesome resource. So it's lovely to actually to be able to connect. Like literally, I'm days away from going back to Grenada, so I'm definitely going to be
Yes.
documenting that move so people can see like the ups and the downs of actually relocating from packing a
Oh
barrel to
gosh, yeah.
the night getting through an
During the
airport.
pandemic, it is a lot. There's so many things that just don't go the way they're supposed to because, things get canceled or things aren't open the way they're supposed to be. So just like you said, pack your patience, trust the
Yeah.
process.
And know that
And
it's going to look nothing like it does on the IG. It's like it's real life, but it's still worth it. It's still worth it.
oh, easy. I won't trade where I'm at for my old life at all. Like never. I'm straight. Sometimes